Welcome to another Classic Car Club After Drive, or no, it's not After Drive. Classic Car Club Drive-Thru. 2017 Lotus Evora 400. I'll admit, I overlooked the Evora for a couple years. I kind of thought it was just a weird looking, gaumy Lotus, like not as cool and full on as the Exige that we had at the time. Then I drove one. I helped a member of the car club. He was selling a Evora S with a Larini exhaust. And I drove it and I was like, I gotta admit, this car is really, really good. You know, great linear power out of a supercharged 3.5 liter. I think it's actually coming from a Toyota Sienna minivan, but we'll forgive it of that. Pretty exotic sounding thing when you get the right exhaust on it. Where it sort of made a step for me for Lotus is that it is a bit more grown up. It's just a little bit bigger, a little bit more comfortable. The suspension is compliant and really works in the real world while keeping that super sharp Lotus feel. So I just thought it was kind of one notch in the sort of more everyday usable sports car direction for Lotus that kind of ticked the right boxes for me in the roads I have to drive on. Also, there was something about it, the supercharger whine and the way the power came on, it was like remind me of a baby Ford GT. We had a couple of 2005 Ford GTs over the years, which is one of my all-time favorite cars. And this gave me a little taste of that without feeling quite like it was gonna rip my head off. We debated it for a while. Evora 400 came out when they brought them back to the US after a year hiatus. And that was supposed to be, you know, the most full-on, tuned-up version of the Evora. And we got one, and sure enough it is. It's kind of everything I liked about that slightly modified Evora S that I drove before packaged into a factory car. So now it has a factory sport exhaust. It's tuned up to 400 horsepower from the factory. In the Lotus way, no dynamic steering, no dynamic suspension. They like to set it right once, and that's the way it should be. And I have to say they've done a great job. It's like I'm always after, a really good balance of compliance to keep the tires connected to the road, but still a really sharp on-center steering feel. Just enough room to like stretch your elbows with another adult in the passenger seat, which you couldn't do in the Elise. And for guys like me with young children, I can actually put them in the back seat. You know, they're not good for much else beyond that, but you know, if you want to bring a flash car home and take your kids out for a ride, pretty cool thing. I think we should get behind the wheel, have a look, see what the actual experience is like, how it matches up to all of what we've heard. Quick stats: 3.5 liter, 400 horsepower, supercharged V6, mid-engine, it's a 6-speed. One stat that surprised me, it's 3,100 pounds, which I have to say when I read that, it kind of let me down a bit. I remember our Elise was something around 2,000, 2,100 pounds. So 1,000 pounds heavier. Sure, it's got another 200 horsepower over our first Elise, but does that all stack up? Is it really gonna adhere to Colin Chapman's theory that light makes right and the best way to make a car go faster and turn better is to add lightness? We'll see how it works. Familiar Lotus stuff here, annoyingly the same immobilizer system that our 2005 Elise had, where even if you don't lock the car, if you leave it alone for like a minute, the immobilizer kicks on anyways and you can't start it until you unlock it again. And a very handy unlabeled key. So Lotus symbol is unlock. And then the button below, I'm not sure exactly what it does, but I know if I push it too many times, it's like a panic button and the alarm goes off. You go to unlock it and you end up setting the alarm off. It's pretty embarrassing. If you get in and there's a red light flashing in the dash, you just have to hit this button here. Ignition here, start button on the left. You got your mirror adjustments on the left, all your AC stuff's in the middle. Some weird aftermarket touchscreen radio, but we're really not interested in that. It does have heated seats, you know, if you're taking this out in the winter, I'm not sure why you'd be doing that. Sport, race, and exhaust. If you're on normal mode and you hit the exhaust, that makes the exhaust louder. If you're on sport mode, the exhaust is automatically loud, and if you hit the exhaust button, it makes the exhaust quieter. With sport and race, you get progressively less traction control as well. We're gonna keep it on sport. I don't have any need to take the traction control off in public roads, and we're gonna see how that goes. This day of hybrid hypercars and paddle shift gearboxes, and I believe this actually may have power steering, which is probably a new thing for Lotus, but if it does, it doesn't feel like it's overwhelming or taking away any feel. And we've got a good old 6-speed manual gearbox through a sports car in an era where it's getting rarer and rarer to find that. So really appreciate that out of the gate. And I do think relative to the Lotus of the past, I love the Lotus Elise and Exige. They're great cars, but they really did feel like toys. And it was a perfect car for the club because everyone wanted to check it out and drive it and have it to drive on the occasion that made sense to drive it. Like half the time you're in the car, you're kind of regretting it. It was tight, there's no room, and you're rubbing elbows with your passenger, and there's no place to put anything. And this feels a bit more grown up. I mean, I got Bob in here with this camera. I'm not bumping into him. I'm comfortable. The suspension's compliant and smooth. It all feels pretty good. I've got a fairly useless back seat, but that also makes for a decent kind of luggage parcel shelf and a trunk in the back. So I could conceivably take this away for a weekend and not regret it the whole time. Keeping to the Lotus spirit, being focused on the driver experience. So far, so good. I think they've done it. I think they just made a car that's one step closer to being a real car you can use for many purposes without totally abandoning the Lotus lightweight, purist sports car spirit. So I've got to admit, some pretty exotic sounds coming out of a Toyota minivan engine. I like that. I really love the motor. It's like really smooth and linear. It's great throttle response, consistent. You know, there's no weird spots in the throttle, and the chassis doing exactly what you want to do. It's sharp. On-center feel is excellent, but the suspension's compliant enough to work. It's not a racetrack. It's not glassy smooth. So you don't want a car that's just super, super stiff. This car manages to corner flat and be really well composed, but still let the wheels go and travel over bumps and keep the tires connected with the pavement. For me, and the roads I have to drive on, I'd say it's great. It's really kind of a great, perfect balance in a pure sports car in a day where you can't find this kind of thing as much anymore. I still don't understand where they put 3,000 pounds in this car, because while it's a little bit larger than an Elite or Exceed, it's not exactly a Cadillac, so I don't understand how we went from 2,100 pounds to 3,100 pounds and by adding 2 cylinders and 2 little back seats. Now that I know that number, I want to say I feel it a little bit in the response and the acceleration. If you think about go-kart like Elise with 400 horsepower, you'd expect that to be violently fast. And this is really, really quick, but it's really quick in a smooth, linear way, which you wouldn't think could happen in a car that was that light. So I guess that's kind of what the weight does. It ballasts the car and takes away a bit of that violent response you expect out of 400 horsepower in such a small car. So I've just come out of the BMW M4 GTS. I've become really, really fond of, and I'm especially conscious of the way that car is just like dial in to excite you, kind of heavy steering, visceral, massive violent power, massive grip, it's just everything, like full on and extreme in a way that I really appreciate. What I can say about this car in the back-to-back comparison, kind of as you'd expect from the Lotus philosophy, is it feels nimble and athletic, and it's really quick, but in a less dramatic way, which isn't a bad thing if you think about what Lotus is trying to do, accomplishing great speed and performance in the most efficient way possible. You're not making a big heavy car with giant power, giant brakes, giant tires. If you can do the same thing with a light car and less power, you'll pay dividends in braking and steering and everything that makes the car enjoyable to drive. So again, while it's heavier than we're used to Lotus as being, it still carries that philosophy through, and it does feel athletic and nimble and kind of spirited in a way that you'd expect Lotus to be.